One of the most common things parents say about school is this: my child learns all these subjects, but they don't seem to connect. History feels separate from literature. Science feels disconnected from faith. Art, music, and theater feel like extras if there's time. And children are left trying to hold together a world that's been divided into pieces. Welcome back to the 9 traits of a life-giving, transformative educational model. And today we arrive at trait number 7, a trait that brings coherence and meaning and depth to learning, integrated and relational learning. Because life is not lived in compartments, and education shouldn't be either. From the very beginning, Scripture reveals a God whose rule extends over everything. There is no part of life outside of his authority, no subject beyond his concern. God's truth touches history and science, art and music, economics and politics, personal decisions and public life. This matters deeply for education because if God is Lord of all, then all learning belongs together. And integrated learning begins with this conviction: truth is unified because its source is God. When subjects are torn apart and isolated, students don't gain clarity, they gain confusion. So what does integrated learning really mean? Integrated learning does not mean covering less content. It means seeing the content more clearly. So instead of studying history as isolated dates and literature as disconnected stories and science as detached facts, students begin to see how ideas, events, discoveries, and expressions develop in relationship to one another. What was happening in history shaped the literature and the art of the time. Worldview influenced art and music, and scientific discoveries raised moral and social questions. Nothing was developing in isolation, and nothing should be taught that way. Integrated learning restores coherence. Learning is relational in more ways than we often realize. First, every subject has a relationship to God because he is the author of truth, order, beauty, and meaning. Second, every subject has a relationship to the learner. Students need to understand, why does this matter to me? And third, subjects reveal relationships between people, how ideas shape cultures and choices and consequences. And finally, subjects relate to the physical world around us. Science, history, and mathematics all explain how humans interact with creation. And when these relationships are made clear, learning stops being abstract and it becomes meaningful. Integrated learning doesn't just help children know more, it helps them remember more. When information is connected, students develop mental file folders. They know where ideas belong. They understand context. They see purpose. This is especially powerful for students who struggle with memory or attention or learning differences. Instead of memorizing random facts, they're learning to connect the dots. And when children see how ideas connect, they begin to think more deeply, more critically, and more wisely. So here is a picture of integration. Imagine studying a period of history, and at the same time, reading the literature it produced, listening to the music of the era, examining the art that reflected its worldview, and discussing the scientific and social developments taking place. Suddenly, history is no longer flat, it becomes human, complex, and alive. And students begin to understand not just what happened, but why it mattered and why it happened. This is the power of relational integrated learning. So some questions for you to ask yourself about your educational choices. As you consider educational options, this particular trait invites careful evaluation. Ask questions like, are subjects taught in isolation or are they intentionally connected? Do students learn how ideas influence one another across disciplines? Is learning presented as part of a coherent worldview or fragmented information? Are children helped to see how faith relates to every subject, not just in Bible class? And does this approach help my child understand why learning matters? Integrated learning doesn't happen accidentally. It requires intentional vision. So a life-giving, transformative education helps children see the world as God designed it, connected, purposeful, and full of meaning. When learning is integrated, children stop asking, why do I need to know this? And they begin asking, how does this help me understand God, the world, and my place in it? In the next episode, we'll explore trait number 8 and look how teaching through principles and leading ideas shape wisdom for a lifetime. Because when learning is whole, the child becomes whole too. And we invite you to learn more about this at legacyparenting.net.